This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe a globally recognized thought leader, author, and international speaker on the future of work and building teams that thrive. Recognized as one of the top 100 emerging innovators under 35 by American Express, his ideas have been featured in Forbes, Thrive Global, Huffington Post, and on the stage of TEDx. This is Eric Termuende. Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Eric, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron tribe. I know we are really excited to have you on this week. I've talked you up quite a bit and reading the bio. I think everybody has been pretty excited to have you on. So again, welcome to the Iron Sharpen Iron movement.
You know, I'm excited to be here. And, you know, we were chatting a little bit pre-recording. Iron Sharpens Iron is the best podcast name I have heard to date. But I also think that the conversation that we have better be good if it's going to be iron sharpening iron, and I think that's just as much on you as it is me. So let's see what we can come up with.
I love it, and it's kind of funny. Eric challenged me, everybody, as we were in the green room. He was like, "You better bring some critical thinking questions to this thing, and you better push back on some of my theories." So the game is on. We got the boxing gloves on. We're ready to go.
Let's go.
And I think this is both our passion, so it should be a fun one. So Eric, again, appreciate your time on this.
Grateful to be here.
You know, one of the things that you're known for is you're known for advocating about waking everybody up and saying, hey, you know, the fourth industrial revolution's coming. It's already here. In the future of work, you know, we have to rethink, you know, what's going on in the future. And a lot of times that's just a lot of talk, right? That gets a lot of people on stages to say, hey, pay attention to what's going on and everything. So can you kind of give us what gave you the bona fides to even get on the stage to really talk about this with authority and give us the journey a little bit about what made you say, hey, we've been doing this all wrong in the past to be ready for the future?
Oh, I mean, blind ignorance is probably the best and most succinct answer I can give you. I mean, if I were to start now, knowing what I know now about the industry, about just, the profession of speaking and everything that goes into it, I probably wouldn't have started over. But, only because the further I get into it to realize, I think, and we can all relate to this to some degree, the more I've got to learn. I mean, 3-4 years ago, I would have told you that I had it absolutely dialed. And now today, I feel like it's day 2 on the job and I'm just starting to get my feet wet. And I think that's sort of the beauty of being a part of, being on this career trajectory, whether it's, whether you're in consulting or whether you're in accounting or whether you're in finance or, any real professional service, there's no finish line. You're never done. And I think that's actually what I like most about the job is, I had a keynote presentation this morning about the future of work. And truthfully, I thought it went quite well. And if there's anything I know about this job is that when I look back at the recording, in 6 months or 8 months or 12 months from now, as I do as a part of my homework, I can almost guarantee that I'll laugh at myself for saying some of the things that I did. It's both embarrassing and humbling at the same time, but it also lets me know that I'm on the right path, because if we're not learning, refreshing, growing every day of the week in this industry, you're probably not growing fast enough.
That's right.
So to take it back to your question, how do we get into this and what are we sort of talking about? The shorter answer is that I couldn't get a job. I graduated from the University of Calgary. I was the vice president of the student union. I had an $18 million budget for 25,000 students. I was part of the clubs, the extracurricular activities, all sorts of things. And I did what a lot of my peers were doing too, and applying to 70 or 80 different jobs by taking that sort of shotgun approach and hoping that something would land. By the way, doing the same thing everyone else was doing and hoping that we'd get our dream job, right? At
Yeah,
Company
that's
X.
right.
without really even knowing what it was we were signing up for. Now, myself and a lot of others that are going through a similar process, we're finding that not only did we not get our dream job, but didn't get a job. And in the research after that, we found that, the 1 in 50 on average resumes get read, and 1 in 10 of those lead to an interview, and 1 in 10 of those land a job. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, I heard that one of my friends was looking for a junior finance person on her team, and she got 736 resumes in 36 hours.
Holy cow.
And so I share all this with you. I asked her, how many did you read? And she said the top 25. So, that is just such a sad reality.
Brutal.
Not her fault, or the people looking for the job. It's just kind of how it is. So what we did is we built a tool that quantified workplace culture. We were trying to put numbers behind the employee experience. So, Jim, it wasn't just what skills and requirements and education you had. It was what life you wanted to live too. Would you rather answer 120 emails in a day, or would you rather be on the phone for 4 or 5 hours a day? These things matter. How far were you going to commute to work? How many were on your immediate team? What did performance management and feedback look like? When we started to understand the actual employee experience, now if there were 35,000 accountants in downtown Vancouver, all doing a very similar job, what we started to realize is that despite doing a similar job, they would live a different life, depending on the company that they worked for, what their values were, what their work environment was. Maybe it was remote, maybe it was in the office, maybe it was in groups, maybe it was individual. And we started to realize, actually, that a universal best culture that doesn't exist. The best place to work in America right now is the Hilton hotel chain. That's what Fortune magazine said in 2020. I think the new numbers are coming out in a couple of weeks. The second best place to work in America is the Ultimate Software, a tech company. I would go ahead and suggest that somebody that works at Hilton wouldn't necessarily want to work at Ultimate Software, and somebody that works at Ultimate Software wouldn't want to work at Hilton. But hey, look, they're both great places to work. Tip of the hat to both of them, and to anyone who's on those lists for that matter. But what we realized, and what really started this journey, is that there is no best culture. And unless we truly understand what makes our people happy and our companies thrive, we will never be able to attract and retain top talent. So if I were to sort of answer your question one more time in the shortest form, what does the future of work look like? Anyone who completes the sentence, the future of work is, doesn't understand how unique the future of work is going to be. And so my answer to that question, what does the future of work look like? The future of work looks, however, will ultimately enable the people on our team to do their best work.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful statement. And that puts the onus back on the organization a little bit too, right?
Well, so often we compare apples to oranges. Well, Facebook is doing this, or
Yep.
Google is doing this. I think I don't want to be quoted directly on the numbers because it obviously varies region to region. But I think I saw the numbers that in America, anyways, 28% of employees are deemed essential. This came out obviously during the pandemic, which basically means that their work didn't change other than a plastic layer in front of their face over the past 12 months. Now we've got about 41% of the population in some sort of professional setting, like think of like an office or more of a white collar. Their work situation changed in that they were working from home or asynchronous or remote. And that's sort of where we get stuck when we talk about like the future of work in air quotes. But the future of work is so much bigger than the white collar employee or the professional employee. The future of work is so varying depending on the industry, the sector, the size, the profit status, the seniority. And I think that where we're losing huge opportunities to build great teams is in that we're trying to say that we're not like somebody else. And that's a problem when in reality, it might be the one thing that actually sets you apart positively from the other company, given that your employee experience is different.
So who's the most powerful person in this discussion? Is there a more powerful person than another? Is it the owner of the organization, let's say the CEO or the board or a founder? Is it the employee? Well, who's the most powerful? Who's got the biggest say in this at the end of the day on culture?
Whoever opens their mouth.
Ha!
That's it. See, here's the problem. I think that everyone's got a voice right now, and many of us are too afraid to use it. Um, we hear so often, how do we get C-suite to buy in, or this doesn't trickle down from the top down to us. Um, but I think there's a lot of inherent fear in trying something new. And let me put it this way. The one thing that I've sort of realized, one of the things I've started to realize over the past 10 months is that the only constant in every meeting that I'm in a day is me. That's the
Yep.
only constant, right? It has to be the case. Where I'm going with this is that how I act to the people that I'm sitting in front of, whether it be virtually or in person, it is contagious by nature. So if I ask someone not just how they're doing, but how they're really doing, we set the tone of the conversation to be something that's more empathetic, perhaps something a little bit more vulnerable, something that's a little bit more accepting. If I went straight into the numbers or the task at hand and skipped that human component, we failed to build connection, we failed to build trust, a sense of belonging, psychological safety, etc. Now, I say this because culture, especially in the past 12 months, has, number one, moved from the office to the living room, and number two, has been absolutely decentralized.
Hmm.
Some folks haven't seen, other than in a PowerPoint deck, their company colors or their logo or their mission, vision, values that used to be on the boardroom behind them when they met together 3 times a day
That's right.
for 12 months. And so then I would empower or invite everyone to consider that culture actually lives in your hands more now than it ever has before, because you're the only constant in every interaction that you have with the company, given that nobody's together like we used to be in the past.
So haven't you found that creates an issue upon itself in the fact that many in organizational leadership positions try to over-index that, right? Like they're just like, hey, we've got to force this good time culture on people, and they're so separated. Let's try to be, double shooter cool guy or girl on
Mhm.
Slack or anything like that. Have you found where people are trying to become the Google of the world and create another culture that truly isn't the corporate culture because of the disconnect? They even find themselves with no North Star.
Those that do that are managers and they're not leaders.
There you go.
I would say that's the difference. What I've seen is that the true empathetic leader in the past 12 months has absolutely democratized and flattened their
Love
team
it.
structure so that everyone is a part of the conversation. Now, quick tip for those who are listening and want to be able to act on that: 3 questions you can ask with your team. Number one, what should we start doing? Number two, what should we stop doing? And number three, what should we continue doing? Now, inevitably, over the past months, we've heard a new best practice that we could try. Something that served us 6 months ago probably doesn't serve us now. And no doubt, the other 80 or 90% of our practices are working really well. So we should continue doing those. But when we have meetings like this every week or every 2 weeks and have everyone to be a part of that conversation, we start to see that our culture, our practices, our systems evolve as the world around us does. And we could get to continue to reinvent what best practices for our team really are.
How agile have you seen as you've been out there really getting a feel for organizations? How agile have you seen the leadership actually turn to this kind of new theory and view of the world? I mean, the in my perspective, a lot of the old school leaders have just been completely caught flat footed. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you talk about how people have to change are empowered by themselves and they're the singular constant in the world, I still think that there's a little bit of a disconnect in old school leadership and how they've got to go top down and then they're trying to fake it until they make it. And then also the empowerment of the average employee. Do you feel that they are also have this sense of empowerment?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I think it's hard to generalize a conversation like that. I think absolutely it exists, and it's not limited to an age of an employee or a position or an industry necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But yeah, I mean, it certainly exists. I think it always has, and I think it always will to some degree. Maybe let me put it this way: what I think we're really bad at as people is giving ourselves credit for the change that we've already made. Um, 20 years ago, the technology that came into play. Maybe I'll ask you. I'll give you a hint. You could hold it in your hand. 1998, this was released. You could hold it in your hand. It was a pretty big deal. It even had a stylus, a pen that you could use sometimes. The technology was a Palm Pilot, and the Palm Pilot had a memory of 512 kilobytes. Today's iPhones or Androids, we're talking 524 gigabytes. So in 20 years, the technology that we have in our hand has 1 million times the memory or capacity that technology did just 20 years ago. Now, remember, this is before Netflix. This is before Airbnb. This is for remote work. This is before a lot of the big companies that we use, any sort of social media at all, Zencaster, Zoom, anything
Yeah.
anything that we're using today didn't exist. Now, the problem is, and I heard this from Ian Crosby. He's the founder and CEO of Bench Accounting. He said the interesting thing about change really is that a lot of our organizational structures are built on wartime hierarchy.
Yep.
Now, if you think, wartime hierarchy was, not all that long ago, maybe 80 years.
Yeah.
And 80 years is really only 4 or 5 generations of time, even less when you look into the workplace. And so when you look at incremental change being made from generation to generation, and then you see the explosion of the fourth industrial revolution and how fast artificial intelligence and machine learning is changing the way that we work and we live and we communicate, we have to start failing forward faster in order to keep up with the speed that the world around us is moving. And I think we're starting to wake up to that now, whether we like it or not.
So when we're waking up to it, right? And so I think everybody, it's kind of around us all the time. But when we're talking from this iron sharpens iron perspective, and 80% of the folks that are listening to this podcast are in a leadership position at some place within their organization.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them aren't getting taught or hearing these kind of things in business school. In the past, are you starting to find, where's this conversation happening though? Where is that mid-level manager starting to really get empowered and start to see the fact of something's got to change? We can't live in the wartime hierarchies of the past.
Mm-hmm.
That things really change because he sees it, she sees it, but how are we now setting up the organizations to really achieve kind of that magic to be that agile?
I mean, it's a great question. It's funny, on the Iron Sharpens Iron podcast, we think that leaders got to where they were, of course, by time spent and experience, but they have to realize that they've been sharpened along the way by other iron, if this is the conversation
Amen.
we're having.
That's right.
What that would then suggest is that anyone in our organization is the iron that has yet to be sharpened. And if we want to get to these answers, if we want to understand a better way of doing things, we have to have the tough conversations. Iron can't sharpen iron without some major friction along the way. And I think that those teams that are doing the best, whether it's Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team or any other research that I've done and understand quite well, a solid team's foundation is a deep sense of trust with the others that are on our organization. If we have a deep sense of trust with our people, then conflict and dissent and a sense of fighting for the greater good of the team and the organization is not something that we scare away from. It's something that actually we can lean into, because when we trust each other at the deepest level, then the conflict is for the betterment of the organization. But if we can't have that conflict, then how do we know that we're committed, that we're accountable, and that we're going to get anything done? I think that for leaders who are stuck in the past, what we have to realize is that the world around us is moving at a breakneck speed. And interestingly enough, despite the COVID pandemic, the slowest the world will ever change moving forward is today.
Mm.
It will continue to move faster. And unless we fail our way forward, unless we make what I like to call 1-degree shifts along the way every day of the week, every conversation that we have, unless we're open to lifelong learning and understanding that the skills that we've got today won't necessarily serve us as well in the future as they have in the past, that we'll have to change it and recognize that, look, to be a successful organization means we have to have a series of successful teams. And to have a series of successful teams must mean that we have to root these teams in a sense of trust, in a sense of experimentation, and know that we have to be lifelong learners along the way.
So if you got a small organization and you're building your teams, what happens if someone's not aligned in that team? Like when we talk about, oh, we're going to build a great culture here, and it seems like a lot of times people are paralyzed by political correctness and are afraid to fire someone. And it may be some even legal ways the way they can't fire somebody, but let's just say in a vacuum, and you could get rid of people or bring people on. What happens? I guess give me your perspective on building a diverse team versus building a team that's dysfunctional. What are the two? Because they could look actually a little similar in a way sometimes. So, what is this sharpening and friction looking like in a positive culture compared to someone that is actually toxic?
Here's what I think needs to be done first. I think we need to have a deeper understanding of not just what our people do, but who they are as individuals. I'll give you a quick story. During the pandemic, I was guilty of watching a little bit more football than I probably should, but I got to learn a little bit along the way. I'm a big fan of the underdogs, and the Cleveland Browns for the last 4 years have been major underdogs. 4 years ago, they were 0-16, or no, 1-15. 3 years ago, they were 0-16. 2 years ago, they were 6-10. Last year, they were 7-8, and this year they were 11-5. They made it to the playoffs. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? So I did a little bit of a deeper dive, and I found out that this year the Cleveland Browns got a new coach, Kevin Stefanski. He was a rookie in the NFL when it came to coaching, and he came in some of the hardest circumstances ever. He came in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
And so when he first came in to coach the team couldn't even get together. They couldn't even be in the same room. And so he said, okay, I need to get my team not just to understand what they do in terms of each other and having them connected, but I needed them to get to really understand the value that they're going to bring to the team as individuals as well. So he did a drill over Zoom with his team in the first days that he was coach, and he asked them to share their 4 H's, their hopes, their history, their heartbreak, and their hopes, their history, their heartbreak, and oh my goodness, I can't remember.
It's going to be a cliffhanger for the show notes.
It's going to be a cliffhanger for the show notes. You're darn right. But what he did is he started by sharing himself. So he shared what his hopes were for the team, what his history was on an individual level, what his heartbreak that he'd been through over the past years. And the fourth thing that he shared, of course, was of his heroes. Who he really looked up to. And when he finished sharing, he asked the team, who wants to share next? And one by one, because people were vulnerable, they were courageous, they were interested in sharing, they wanted to connect on a human level, even these big football guys.
Yeah.
Each player went through this exercise, and by the end of the conversations, they weren't just better connected as football players, they were better connected as people. And once they built that foundation with each other, that's when they could have these tough conversations. That's when they could really shape each other through the conflict that happened along the way. Look, they were 11-5. They still lost 5 games. They still had a ton of learning to do. But by the end of the season, they made it to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years. They won a playoff game for the first time in 27 years. And Kevin Stefanski, just last week, he was awarded Coach of the Year, a rookie coach, won Coach of the Year, because he knew that when our team trusted each other off the field, they played better together on the field. So here's the question I've got for leaders that are listening. How well do you know your team? Not just what they do, what their skills, what their requirements, what their education are, how effective they are at getting those KPIs or the quarterly targets done. Okay, great. That's all important. Don't get me wrong. That's all important. Of course, the Browns, they had to win too. but who are you really working with? And what's going on behind the scenes? Are they teaching their kids school right now while cooking and still getting the work done? Are they balancing the loss of a loved one? And look, we don't have to get the crowbar out and pry into these things. But at the same time, when we create the space to be open enough to sharing something like that and being safe, that's when I think we can really get our work done, not just because we feel like we have to, but because we get to work with incredible people that care about us and are truly in it together, as opposed to just sort of an empty statement that we've heard for 12 months.
What do you do? This is a boxing glove question
Mm-hmm.
because you dodged it. So I'm going to bring it back to you. What do you do when you have a toxic individual then? When someone is toxic? What do you do when someone doesn't want to be the team player? What
Mm-hmm.
do you do when you say, I'm sharing my hopes, my history, my heartbreak, and my heroes? And they're like, I'll pass. Never mind. What happens then, Eric?
On a personal level, and look, I mean, this is where I think the uniqueness of leadership really gets to play in. So, to suggest that I've got a prescription for something like this would probably be, I don't have the recipe for success. But what I would try and do as hard as possible without forcing anything, and I think that's the key. And I think that was the key in this Stefanski story too, is he didn't force anyone to share. He invited everyone to share, and he invited everyone to share by first creating that safe space and sharing himself, what was vulnerable
Yeah.
and courageous to him. And so I would want to understand, toxicity in the workplace isn't fluke. It doesn't just happen. There's been some event that has occurred that is preventing someone from feeling safe, from feeling accepted, from feeling like they belong, or feeling like they're making a difference. And I would want to understand what was the root of this shift that we started to see. Now, it's almost always going to be some relationship issue, some communication issue that almost always can be mitigated or fixed. Now, if it's not one of those things, then it's something that's happening in their personal life. And if it's something that's happening in the personal life that's being brought into work, then the question is, how can I be there for that person so that I can help them feel like this might be an escape or a break or something to look forward to, because now they've got a friend in me that can help them get through something hard. Now, look, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, nor are many of the leaders that might be listening to this conversation. But at the same time, I think that we're in the midst of, and this was even last year before the pandemic, 40% of American adults identified as feeling lonely or feeling isolated.
Wow.
Fewer people have a best friend now than ever before. Again, this is pre-pandemic. We're in the loneliest time, I would probably argue, in history, despite being, what I put in air quotes, better connected than we've ever been before. And so I would really want to understand, again, without forcing it anything, how I can put myself in their shoes to understand where I'm feeling left out, isolated, lonely. I'm feeling not safe, or like I'm not making a contribution or a difference. And I would try and fix that. Did you know that 1/3 of employees right now in Canada and America have not been recognized for the work that they've done in more than 6 months? And
Wow.
I don't mean like here's a gift card and here's a day off. I mean, like, you did a fantastic job last week on that thing. You really hit it out of the park. That's what I mean by recognition.
That does not surprise me. It does not surprise me, which is a sad statement, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like we are humans, right? Everybody wants that level of recognition and reward.
Sure, and not even that level, a level, and it might vary. It might be a little, gift certificate for a coffee that slipped into your inbox that you don't even really mention. Some people might want the public display of, this person did such a great job. Everyone send them a quick note on Slack right now. Let them know how much they're appreciated. It varies, but I think as a leader, especially now, and look, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be empathetic and to really have your thumb on the pulse of the team as a whole and as an individual. But I believe that it's really what separates great leaders apart from the rest, is knowing that really what these leaders are doing is that they're enabling and creating a safe space for their people to do their best work because they want to and not because they feel like they have to.
It's amazing too. And when you get to that type of leader, And when you talk to those type of leaders, it's so natural. It becomes natural to them. Like, why? It's inconceivable to think any other ways not to pat somebody on the back or to love. When I do my executive coaching, some of the leaders that I coach, they're actually shocked and taken aback when I say there's nothing wrong with using the word love. Like,
Mm-hmm.
love is a positive word in leadership. You can love your organization, love your people, love what you do, love your product. And so many people are just afraid to say that very simple, very powerful word. It is amazing. So when you talk like this, Eric, is these some of the scenarios where you get into your 1 degree shifts? Are these the fundamental things that are different between kind of an average organization and a high performing organization? Is simply, like an example of recognizing your people and things like that?
Yeah, let me put it this way. I've also learned in the past 12 months that I'm really horrific at predicting the future. Like really bad, really bad. I didn't think GameStop would go to $300+ I did not think that was going to happen. I didn't think Tom Brady, when he went to Tampa and had a losing record in the first 5 games, that he would be hoisting the Lombardi.
Yep.
I didn't think the Tesla Cybertruck would look as insert the blank as it does. I didn't think that Rage Against the Machine would be coming back after a 20-year hiatus and then headlining Coachella. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
But that was all this. That was canceled too, as I'm sure we probably guessed. What I've learned is that too, the world can change at the blink of an eye. With the headline in the news, and the world as we know it looks different than it did. A lot of us had our strategic plans, our annual commitments that we did in January of last year, and by March 17th, the whole thing was thrown out the window. What a 1 degree shift is it's that smallest viable change, the smallest thing that we can do to continually reduce friction across our team. Now, that might be in communication styles, that might be in our systems, in our feedback, in our recognition. It's another way of saying, how are we consistently, in every conversation that we have and in every decision we make, how are we reviewing what's happened, understanding what worked well and what didn't, and making that smallest change over and over again so we can create something a little bit more intentional, that's been done because of what we learned from the past as we enter what is sure to be an uncertain future tomorrow. And so the leadership applied, when we look at this 1 degree shift, it really starts with asking those 3 questions. What do we start, stop, and continue doing? But it also enables us to isolate where the friction on our team is coming from, or in the system or the process. And it allows us to make that smallest viable change. I'll give you an example. March the 13th, I landed at LAX from Vancouver. I was down there. I was heading down for an event. And when I opened my phone, so the NBA had been canceled for the rest of the season. And then 10 minutes later, Disneyland, which was now almost across the street from me, had just closed. It was at that point I
Scary.
realized I'm probably in the wrong country,
Yeah.
given that I'm Canadian, and I should fly back as soon as possible. So I caught the next flight about 58 minutes later back to Vancouver, where I've been for the last year. But on that Monday, my partner, Jill, and we were sitting at our dining room table because she now had her monitor under one arm, her keyboard under the other, her cell phone tucked under her ear in between her shoulder as she's trying to get everything done. And we had a disastrous week of insane inefficiencies from who
For
was going
sure.
to make lunch to, wait a second, we don't have any groceries, to, wait, there's a pile of laundry in the laundry room, to, you can't talk, I'm on a call with an SVP. I said, well, I've got a call with a client, what are we going to do? We then took a 1 degree shift approach where we slowly made little change after little change, rearranged our apartment. We changed the lighting. We changed the furniture. We changed where she's working now. We mapped out each other's schedules. We put in a plan as to who's going to cook when does laundry get done. And over a few months, we reduced friction to the point that we've got a very seamless process right now that isn't always perfect. And I think we can all relate to that. But it gets better, and our relationship has got better as a result too. So as a leader, the question that I would want us to ask then is, where are we experiencing friction on our team, and what are the little 1 degree shifts that we can pilot and test along the way so that we can improve The friction, or at least the tension on our team, as we enter, would assure to be an unpredictable and an uncertain tomorrow.
Oh, I love it. And it seems like it's a simple thing, but most people don't ever talk about it, right? But you need someone like yourself to say, "Have you thought about the
Mm,
smallest of things?" It's not too daunting either, right? You're not coming in, "Hi, my name's Eric, and here's my 16-point plan to change your culture,"
right.
right? You're not
Right.
you're not coming in like with the hordes of consultants to really solve the issue that way.
hmm Maybe I'll share with you this: what I've surrendered, what I've really, the biggest change I've made over the past year is that I've surrendered to the uncertainty of tomorrow. And I'll unpack that a little bit. Um, I used to have various goals and all these things sort of mapped out, and tomorrow I'm going to do this, on Friday I'm going to do this, next week I'm going to do this. And I think that work schedules aside, of course, we're going to plan all these little things, but I've surrendered to letting life uh, I've surrendered to letting life happen. um,
Hmm.
and I don't think I can say that I've ever done that before, because I think the biggest problem with a 5 or a 10-year goal is the lesson that we choose to ignore 2 months into it, right? Because that wasn't part of the plan. That's not where I was supposed to be going. There is no I'm
Yeah,
supposed to be going anywhere, and the plan was only as good as you were the day that you made it.
that's right.
And we know that in 2 months, an incredible amount of things can happen. So instead of having this plan or this formula that I put in concrete, right? What I've done instead now is saying, okay, here's the direction that I want to head. And if a door presents itself along the way, I can promise you one thing, and that's I'm going to be knocking on that door and seeing what's on the other side. Because if there's something on the other side that's greater than, I would say, in very loosely, the plan or at least the direction that I had in place yesterday, I'm running through that door to the next opportunity that presents itself. I
Gosh,
think
I
when this happens, I think that the sky is the limit, because we can't possibly anticipate what success or happiness is going to look like until we get there. And how many times is that always different than we thought it might be?
let me ask you, Eric, what are your beliefs? I know you're like, hey, I'm not looking in the crystal ball. I don't come with, exact methodologies, all that stuff. But like, what's your opinion on, people? I do a lot of assessments in my coaching work, right? And you get to like, be more self aware. There's so many people walking around with the unconscious zombie effect of who they really are as behaviors and stuff and like that. What is some of your advice to the individual that is afraid to take that leap and all of that? Do you believe that they should take some time to really have some introspective time with themselves to really have the power to feel empowered, to imagine who they are, all of those kind of things? What in your view is the most important thing that you can tell an individual for life in general, really, about how this is happening?
Breathe. That's it.
Breathe. Huh?
I,
It's pretty
I, I just
powerful.
I'm trying to connect with myself better when I answer that question, and what came to me is literally what I just did. It was just close your eyes, take one deep breath, and proceed with an open mind. I absolutely reserve the right to change my opinion 4 times in this conversation. Forget next week, forget next month, forget next year. I promise you that everything is going to change. Um, but what I would do is to create time and space for ourselves to understand, is this what I think I should be doing? Or is this truly what makes me happy? And is it the destination that I'm looking to arrive at, or is it the journey along the way that ultimately will keep me fulfilled? Because I think what some of the best intended, worst advice that we've always been given is to go and find or go and follow your passion. The problem with that is that we keep chasing this unicorn that doesn't exist because we're always looking for more, for next. We become greedy for happiness. Instead, I would think that instead of trying to find our passion, I would say sit with the things that make you feel passionate. And that can come from 1,000 different sources. And when we take the time to breathe, to create a little bit of time and space, and to understand that maybe, wait a second, maybe it's not where I'm going to be, but it's exactly where I need to be right now. Now, it's playing devil's advocate on my own answer. You might think, well, I've got 120 emails. I've got 16 meetings coming up. I barely carved out time for this podcast. What do I do? Again, it's one breath. It's one 1 degree shift. It's one action at a time that allows us to give ourselves permission to allow life to happen. And when it does, we're ready for any opportunity that presents itself.
Dang, Eric. That was the most powerful 4 minutes I've ever experienced doing a podcast. I will tell you, that came out of left field a little bit on the power that I personally felt with your reflection here in the last few minutes. And I normally end podcasts with, hey, give us one more thing to think about and all that, but no way. I want people to end on this high right now, because I will tell you, I love the fact that you just said, sit with the things that make you passionate instead of chasing that passion. That's amazing. And I will tell you, I wrote this down and circled it and underlined it. And it's going to be the title of this podcast is Surrender to the Uncertainty of Tomorrow. That's a freeing statement. That's one of those iron sharpens iron kind of statements, where
We did it.
See it, you read it, and you're just like, amen, amen. So Eric, powerful stuff. We started with really talking about what culture should look like and be like, and the power of teams and understanding those things and kind of bringing it down to the individual level. And thanks for being vulnerable with us, because that's where I really felt it. And I understand the passion that you have every single day. And thanks for kind of breaking the chains on us and freeing us a little bit to understand to live in the here and now.
Awesome. Hey, well, listen, thanks so much for the opportunity. This has been great. It's been challenging in the best kind of ways, and I'm excited to take this experience into everything that happens next.
Thanks, Eric. We really appreciate it, and the tribe's better for listening to your words today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Listening to Eric explain how culture and leadership will shape our future of work was just awesome. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so that we can continue to build our tribe. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.